make a living for themselves.
All right, should be good on YouTube. Okay. All right, I can't find Dr. Green on my screen. Where'd you go?
I'm here.
Oh,
I think if I talk, I'll pop back up.
All right, so today is September 27th. It is our second session of our negotiations for the 21-22 contract. The first session was on September 13th. We both passed proposals and we'll be offering responses to those. But Dr. Green, I think you asked that Dr. Fontan present first some information for us.
Yes, I think we'll go first this evening, mainly because there were a lot of questions that seemed to arise from our proposal that surrounded some of the meetings and ESE things that we put related to teaching assignments and duties in Article 6. So I asked Dr. Fontan if she would be willing to come have conversation. I know Melissa Braun is also on the line and might be able to answer questions. Melissa is part of our team, so she'll be with us for the duration, but I thought after Dr. Fontan had a conversation, if there was any questions you had for her, that when she finished, she could be done and back to her other 100 responsibilities for the day.
Okay. We're ready.
So Carol, what do you want me to, I know there were questions about the type of documentation we were requesting, and I guess
So I think some of the concerns, and Anthony, please feel free to jump in, were why did we, feel the need to add some of these things to the contract? Because they felt that the expectation of teachers was already there in terms of, coming prepared to meetings. I think there were some of the questions of what did advocacy or litigation or those sorts of things that we had put in there mean if something was going to be challenged, what types of challenges might there be? The logging, why is that important? And does that add an extra layer of work for them that they're already having to prove that they've done this time? And there's things in Performance Matters, and formerly used to be Edline, but I think it's Performance Matters now, where teachers log some things. And so those are the kinds of questions that they had. What are some of the difficulties that we've been experiencing?
So if I could maybe kind of go through the proposal and then ask questions, specific questions. So I'm looking at Section D, teaching assignments and duties about lesson planning. And the sentence that BPS added in there was, teachers are expected to show necessary documentation for the student with IEPs, 504 plans, ESOL requirements, and other accommodations. So after that, they've added in, such documentation includes a log recording of when services were provided, and for all ESE direct services provided, the time, date, topic of what was taught. So Dr. Fontan, our first question, we were very confused as to whether or not you guys are asking those ESE teachers just providing ESE services to keep this log, or are you talking about gen ed teachers who are using student accommodations to keep a log?
It's both. So every service that's on the IEP, the special education services that are usually done by ESE teachers, and or the accommodations that are sometimes done in the gen ed classroom, there has to be documentation that those accommodations were provided and that those services were provided. What's been happening, I'll be honest with you, we're getting a high influx of state complaints where the parent calls the Florida Department of Education and complains about the IEP services not being provided. And when the state comes down and does an investigation, we have to submit, here's the list of services that were on the IEP, here are the accommodations, and then they'll ask us for teacher documentation that those services were provided, that those accommodations were provided. And sometimes I get those documentations, sometimes teachers don't provide anything. And then we've been found out of compliance already in one state complaint because we have no teacher data collection.
So, Dr. Fontaine, why is it necessary that they use a specific log? I mean, because you say, sometimes teachers don't have that, but, for all our, teachers who are out there logging this in their own unique way already, that has been found to be acceptable. Why would they have to switch to this formatting?
There is no specific formatting. I just need the documentation. Whatever documentation that they have would be acceptable. If they ever, sometimes the state or an OCR complain, they may contact the teacher and do a conference call they'll have them explain how they documented things. And if the teachers are able to say, here's my documentation, here's how I track it, that is good enough. There's not a specific format. It's just getting the information.
Okay. I mean, because we've talked previously, because I understand that this can be an issue as well. And you said things like, if they shorten the assignment and they just wrote on there shortened assignment and maybe, a sentence or two how it was shortened, or if they had extended time on a test and they just noted on there extended time on the test, those are still acceptable.
Correct. Even if it's under lesson plans, anything that they gave me that shows their documentation of providing those services.
And Anthony, just so you know, I'm going to let I want Dr. Fontaine to be able to answer our questions, but I do have an example of a log because we're oftentimes asked for samples. And I do have an example that I can share with you. I don't want to do it now because it's too hard for me to share my screen in the midst of this, but just as a thought.
Well, and if this was agreed to, I mean, I don't think it would hurt to provide an example with the caveat that this is an example and this is not what you have to use if you have a different method. Because Melissa was explaining to us and Vanessa as well, that there's actually a way you can document in focus that's pretty easy as well. So we don't want to limit people to a certain way as long as they're doing it. And, I do understand the importance because we have this situation frequently where there's a complaint against the teacher and that they're not providing services and so on. Then I have to explain to the teacher, well, in this case, your union isn't going to provide your legal representation. The district is, because you are the district in this case, and they're looking out for you as well as the district. So, I mean, I do understand why this is important. Let me just say that.
And Anthony, we already have our quality IEP website that we're updating. That we already have through trainings shown multiple samples of different ways that people can do it, just as samples, as giving them ideas. But we've always said, as long as the teacher figures out what works best for them is the best way that works for them, I'm okay, as long as we can produce that when asked for it.
Yeah, no, that I understand. Now, the next part of the proposal was asking for routine submission of lesson plans shall not be required except in the following instances: for teachers of students with disabilities who IEP implementation is being challenged or monitored for compliance. And with this, my concern is I understand if there's an OCR complaint, but if it's perhaps the parent or an advocate, it kind of seems overboard. It seems like that's adding a lot onto our teachers' plates that are already, overflowing, breaking, way more than they can handle already. So, just in my personal experience, of course, most parents understand how hard the teachers are working in order to meet their students' needs. But sometimes we get some pretty unreasonable parents and advocates involved in these cases. And I have a little concern that that's adding way too much on their plate. Now I can see if it's, an actual civil rights complaint in action, the need for that. Absolutely. Because you guys are doing the legal defense. But kind of working the way up to that, it seems excessive to me.
So and maybe I'm reading this wrong, and you guys have been doing this longer, this meeting, so maybe I'm interpreting that if I request to review it, not to give it to the parent, not to give it to the attorney, it would be for us, and Melissa, jump in if that's for me to review and say, hey, we made it, because sometimes when I go to these complaints, I end up doing a resolution agreement. And I may, at the resolution agreement, I would say the district will ensure monitoring of ESE services provided to the student for the next 2 months. Then I, as a district, have to verify that we're providing the services. So they're not giving that to anybody. They're giving it to my staff to ensure that if we sign a legal agreement that we're going to do certain things, that we're able to check on that. And Melissa, jump in if that's not what the interpretation of that was.
That's my understanding as well.
Okay,
So it's not going to parent, it's for us district personnel, but sometimes.
But you're saying only once that some sort of agreement has been decided.
Correct,
Okay.
some kind of resolution agreement. Sometimes I get a state complaint and I will realize that, yes, we don't have the data and we're maybe missing some services we did not provide. So I rather go to an agreement and come to a resolution than have a whole investigation. So I may agree that we're going to be monitoring, and that's when I would ask for those to make sure that I can say that we're doing it, because I won't know unless I see it.
I understand what you're saying. The next piece about teachers coming to IEP and or 504 meetings are expected to bring appropriate documentation and be prepared to identify and answer questions about documentation, IEP goal, accommodation data, provisions, et cetera. We're greatly concerned with that, other than we feel that that's already expected in our evaluation system. And, Dr. Green also often tells me well, if it's not a problem, why do we need it in the contract? So I gotta just dig in a little bit on that one. But the next part, there shall be no expectation that an IEP be written more than a week before an IEP conference, except in cases involving attorneys, advocates, or litigation, which will require IEPs to be written 2 weeks prior to the IEP meeting or IEP conference, provided the writer of the IEP is given 48-hour notice. With that, the biggest concern was that 48-hour notice wasn't necessarily a lot of notice for people with a lot on their plates. Let's face it. I mean, how many of our ESE teachers are being pulled to cover right now? I was talking to one school today. They're down to one ESE resource teacher, so she's having to cover K6. So there's a lot on these people's plates, and I think 48 hours seemed a little tight to us. And then also, I don't know, Dr. Fontan, maybe you can tell me, how often are advocates involved in these cases? I mean, when I taught, there was, it's a gen
I'm
ed
looking at
teacher.
my cases. Let me
Okay.
I'll tell you right now how many active cases I have with either attorney or parent advocate or a state complaint. And I'm turning around because I have a log on my side over here.
Yeah.
I have roughly about close to 20 cases.
All right. Well, I mean, that's not, because here's our concern. We know that there are, there's some folks with very large caseloads, and I mean, if you have a caseload of 40 students and this is only for one of them, that might be reasonable. But if it's prevalent to where you're gonna have 10 of these, it could be really overwhelming.
I don't see 10 in one for one teacher, to be honest. I've never seen 10 in one teacher.
Okay.
I will tell you, I'm going to talk about both things. And
Have you seen 9 though? I mean,
have I seen 9? No.
Okay.
No, usually one And right now, and Melissa, I think we have maybe one per school of the schools. They're all different schools. So it's like not all in one location. I will tell you the issues and the 48 hours, I'm not a negotiator. I don't know how the 48 hours came about, but let me talk about the IEPs. Sometimes the attorneys and the parent advocates want a draft copy of the IEP ahead of a meeting. That is something that they can request, a parent can request. It makes the meeting go better because they know ahead of time what we're proposing. So they're not walking in and we're trying to read every single thing on the IEP and go back and forth. Usually attorneys will then have an idea walking in, here's the areas I want to address. I'm okay with everything else. So it makes the meeting a little bit better. The reason we want the IEP more than a week is because we want to make sure we're in compliance, making sure everything on that IEP is compliance. Because if I have an attorney involved, it could lead to litigation where we have to go in front of a judge on a due process hearing and defend that IEP. So that's given us time to make sure everybody's looked at it, we're in compliance, everything that needs to be on that IEP is appropriate to present the draft to the attorney. The 48 hours, I don't know how that came about, to be honest with you, but I think that's something that we can agree to give it more time if the teacher was notified more than 48 hours. Number 20 is my 20, the bring in documentation. You are correct. My expectation is that ESE teachers, any teacher that comes into IEP meeting brings data about the student, just like a gen ed teacher would bring grades and how the student's doing, working towards the IEP goals, able to communicate when accommodations are being provided. Unfortunately, we are seeing not a whole lot of that. And then they come in when they know an attorney's already going to be at this meeting. So it's not like they were surprised. There's never an attorney that shows up, surprise, I'm here. They're well aware that an attorney's going to come in. They come in and an attorney will say, so can you tell me there's a reading goal that you put on the progress report that the child's mastering that goal? Can you show me your data and tell me how you're assessing that goal? And we get from the teacher, we don't have that, or I don't remember, like, and that litigation wise, that's setting me up for further. So we're just trying to protect our staff and not to go any further with litigation. And yes, that's the expectation. We'll get a lot of, I didn't know, I don't think I'm required to do that. Why do I have to bring that? We get a lot of pushback sometimes. And all we're trying to do is protect the teacher. All we're trying to do is try to resolve whatever the issue is and protect the teacher for any further. I don't want them to be in a due process hearing. I don't want them to have to testify in front of a judge. So we're just trying to be proactive. So that's where number 20 came about. And Melissa, if I'm incorrect on that one.
You're spot on.
Yeah,
We're just trying to be prepared and assist the whole team.
And by no means do we disagree with that. We have the same expectation of our teachers as well. I mean, I just got to reiterate, we all know what's going on right now. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming for our teachers and administrators right now. And people are just trying to keep their heads above water. But I certainly understand that expectation. I just wanted to ask Bill. Bill, do you have, Bill's our resident ESE expert. So Bill, do you have any questions or clarification?
No, thanks, Anthony. I when we talked about this earlier, I didn't really have any concerns about this at all. It seems like reasonable expectation, but somebody brought out the point that on the item saying teachers coming to IEP and or 504 meetings are expected to bring appropriate documentation. The point was brought out that very often teachers are grabbed at the last minute because for whatever reason. And, that in that circumstance, the expectation is not reasonable. Literally could be grabbed in the hallway 2 minutes before the meeting. So I think as long as we understand that, I don't know if it needs to be written into that section. But no, I don't. Overall, I don't have any issues with any of this language other than that one condition.
Now, and again, I probably should keep my mouth shut, Carol and Melissa, but I'm gonna jump in. I'm okay with writing on there, if you want to start it with properly noticed teachers, where they've been notified of the meeting, they were told they were gonna come to this meeting. That should fix the problem of teachers that had no idea there was an IEP meeting and they're walking in. The things that I've seen in these meetings have been when it's been district staff there, attorneys have been there, and everybody knew this meeting was happening. So, but I get where you're coming from, Bill.
All right. And then, Matt, did you, as an ESE teacher, did you have any concerns, questions?
No, not about that particular part, but just.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
any of this proposal about the ESE documentation?
Yeah, I just wanted a little more clarity, I guess, on the ESE kind of accommodations log / when the services are being provided. Is that expected to be like a redundant type report where so like if I'm in an inclusive setting, am I going to go ahead and fill that out as well as the ESE service provider, or is that kind of incumbent upon the ESE service provider to document that?
I'm going to go with the attorney language. It depends. It depends on who's providing the service. I would want the person who's providing the service to be the one documenting. So if the ESE teacher pushes it into your classroom and is doing small group instruction and reading, she's going to document that. But if you're given a test and you're the one given the accommodation, that you would document as the gen ed teacher the accommodation for the test you provided.
So perhaps the language could be inserted in the event of a collaboratively taught classroom, comma, the ESE teacher will be responsible for this documentation, period. And I think that will alleviate Matt's concerns.
Yeah, it would.
But would the ESE teacher be aware of the test accommodation that the gen ed teacher is providing? Because I heard Dr. Fontan say it's the person who actually provides the accommodation.
Because that test may be given to that child when the ESE teacher is not in the classroom, so they would not know what accommodations were provided.
Well, Matt was asking about the redundancy issue, and the redundancy issue comes in an inclusive setting, a collaboratively taught classroom where both ESE and gen ed teachers are both present. I think what he was asking is it necessary for both teachers to document that? And I think the answer is no. And so if we want to spell out the language that way, that really is specific to that condition. When it's not an inclusively taught, an inclusive classroom, when it's not collaboratively taught, what I'm hearing is that gen ed teacher does need to document that they are aware of and providing those accommodations.
And Bill, because there's so many, because collaborative teaching has a specific definition, if we're going to use that language, we need to define what that is. When a gen ed teacher and ESE teacher are in the classroom the whole time period. Because because in elementary, it's it's not the same.
I think it's a good idea to clearly define that. I'm used to using those terms. Collaboratively taught classroom to me means either a co-taught or a support facilitation classroom, but that can easily be defined in the language. The idea is that both teachers are present. They don't both need to document that, right? I mean, at that point, we make it the ESE teacher's responsibility when they're both present.
But again, I'm hearing something different. Patricia's example was if in a collaboratively taught classroom, the ESE teacher is providing small group services, they're going to document that. But if the general ed teacher is providing test accommodations, a shortened test or multiple choice and options, that's going to be documented by the gen ed teacher. And that is a collaboratively taught classroom. So I still think in a collaboratively taught classroom, there might be two sets of documentation that's coming in for accommodations.
Yeah, actually, you're right, Dr. Green, because we're dealing with multiple students. So that situation could certainly happen.
Yeah, that's just my concern is I wanted to avoid kind of we put it in the contract. Yeah, we agree on the language. And then after the fact, you're going, I thought she was going to write it. Well, I thought he was going to write it. I'm trying to provide clarity of language to make sure we know exactly whose responsibility that would be.
So if we wrote something along the lines of the teacher providing the service and or accommodation is responsible for documentation, that's pretty clear for everybody, right? If I'm gen ed and I'm providing an accommodation, I'm going to write it down. If I'm ESE teacher providing small group instruction, I'm going to write it down. And if I'm also providing an accommodation, I'm just going to mark that too.
Yeah, that sounds good. to
Remember
me.
you said that, Melissa.
I wrote it down.
Okay, good. All right. Do we have any more questions for Dr. Fontaine?
I do. I just think, this language is a little overwhelming to think about from the secondary perspective. We have a lot of our secondary teachers who, may be given a whole load of regular classes, like we're going to give you all the regular juniors. Take an English teacher, for example, and they've got like 150 to 180. And this exists right now in our schools because obviously I think we've got 152 openings and schools can't hire. So we have English classes that have 30, 35 kids in it. That's a regular class. These teachers have, 75% of their kids are on an IEP of 504, their ELL. The documentation is to be completely honest, teachers don't have time in their day to document everything that they need to document, mainly because they're losing so much planning during the week because we can't get substitutes. We can't, and they're covering classes. So the idea of using the word log makes me throw up a little bit as a secondary English teacher, because that's insane. Because we might know what we're talking about here on this call. Teachers should be prepared. They should be documenting when they're shortening assignments or when they're giving extended time or when they're doing any of those things. And I believe that a lot of our teachers are already doing that. I know I used Edline, had the feature where you could right click and select. You could actually put stuff in there, add your own special ones. Focus has it. I see it all over my son's grades when he either had extended time or shortened assignment or whatever it is, for his 504, it's on there. And so I believe our language that we have already captures that. So I don't know, to me, it almost feels like we are punishing the many for the sins of the few instead of this should be, the admin should be working with the student services department to make sure that those teachers on an individual basis that are not doing their jobs are reminded what they're supposed to have. Because you throw the word log on there and, next thing you know, you have admin at a pre-evaluation meeting saying, I want to see your log for all your documentation. And they don't, they pull up Focus and say, well, this is what I'm doing. No, you have to have a log. And I just think the way this is written is way too open-ended and that there's a lot left for interpretation.
All right. Any other questions? Okay.
Vanessa,
All right.
can I just ask you a question? So what if the sentence said something along the lines of such documentation includes a recording of when services were provided? It doesn't need, and remove the word log, because my background's as secondary English teacher. I completely understand what you're saying.
I don't like the word log at all because it implies some sort of paper printout that, and I mean, I don't even want elementary teachers, I know, if they're departmentalized can have, 3 separate classes of students. So they also have a big bulk of students, but then you're looking at our secondary, who, if it's, a school is perfectly hired, they've got 150 students in front of them. They cannot be expected to say, we did, a shortened assignment and then a 2-sentence, how they shortened it. I mean, the assignment is on Focus. The parent has access to the assignment at home. They should be able to see, oh, my kid only did half these problems. So just the basic idea of this is what I did, I think should suffice. And I know teachers are doing it. That's why I feel like, I don't know if this is aimed at punishing the sins of the few, when the many are doing what's right.
All right, so let me just ask this question. Dr. Green, are you gonna rewrite this proposal, or do you want us to offer a counter?
We can work on it. I took pretty
Okay.
good notes. I think Melissa took good notes. I don't know if Patricia's been taking notes or if she's just been talking, but I think we'll get together and we'll have one, we'll get together and resubmit something.
All right, excellent.
Anthony,
All right.
can I ask a question
Yeah.
real quick? I wonder if this would be acceptable to all parties. If a printout of each student that has accommodations, listing their accommodations, is included in the teacher's lesson plan book without just an acknowledgement that these students have accommodations, and then, these students are receiving these accommodations in a general sense, they're receiving them on a daily basis without having to document every single lesson every single time. Would that be acceptable to both parties?
Not to the Florida Department of Education, who does the investigation.
That would not be acceptable, Dr. Fontaine? Understood. Okay.
So
that won't meet your needs then. I understand.
Anthony, can I just
Sure.
follow up on what Bill was suggesting? So, and I know everybody does it differently, and I think that's what we're kind of saying. Like, as long as you're documenting it some way, we're good with it. But kind of along the lines of what Bill was saying, like, if you had it in your lesson plans and you had examples of when you did it and some just really basic log of, this is when I did a shortened test or something like that, it sounds like that would actually be okay with you guys. Just make sure you actually have that stuff.
So here's the way the IEP is for FSS, and I'm just going to do extended time for tests. I'm just going to stick to the most common one. And it says the child is supposed to get 20% more than the gen ed student. For every test, the expectation is from the DOE, and I'm just telling you because I submit the documents to them, is that if they list, here are all the tests, where did the teacher document that they provided that 20%? I will tell you, when parents file the state complaint, so they'll go very specific to, these are the tests that my child did not get the testing accommodation, and they got this grade. Now we have to show our documentation saying, yes, we did provide the testing accommodation, and here's our documentation to show that. So that's the kind of stuff that I will tell you, through this whole COVID and where we are now, the state and the federal government has not given us any flexibility whatsoever. We've been asking to look at things differently under everybody's circumstances, and we keep getting no, you're still required to provide these things. So that's, and to me, more than anything, if teachers come to the table and can speak to what they do and be strong of, here's what I do it, here's how I do it, we're good. When teachers are not strong enough to speak and be comfortable, that's when we start going sideways, because then everybody feels like, well, are you really doing that? Because you can't tell me what you're doing. Mm-hmm. That's where we get into the pickle, and then everybody wants to see the documentation to back up what you're saying.
All right, so I'm going to ask my team, for the sake of time, if we have further concerns, we talk about it in caucus, but I'm going to ask Dr. Green to rewrite the proposal and address some of our concerns now that we have a lot more clarity on it.
Thank you, Dr. Fontaine, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you. All right. So where do you want to go from here? Do you want to?
Let me, based on another concern that you have had during our, when we presented language before, I do have a rewritten clause that I do want to share with you. Can I share my screen? Can I do that, or does Kyle have to do that?
I have to give you permission here. What am I doing? Okay, you should be able to do it now.
How about, do you see it? Oh, no, wait, hang on.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Okay. It says Article 6, Section A, fair employment.
Yep.
Okay. So when we had proposed this last week, I think Vanessa brought up that we had started with we just added the word, we're starting with Article 4, Step 4, I believe is what we put. And Vanessa said, well, this clause means more than just termination. There's other things that have to do with arbitration. So we're starting over. And this is our new language. It would be adding a special an additional section for termination only. So special procedures for termination charges. Within 15 days of the date written notice is delivered advising of charges involving termination, the grievant must notify the district in writing to communicate his or her election to contest the charges via 1, a direct hearing by the district school board or subcommittee thereof pursuant to Florida Statute 1012.335 subsection 4. 2, formal arbitration pursuant to step 4 of the grievance procedure, or 3, for PS staff only, and that's per statute, a hearing conducted by an ALJ assigned by DOA pursuant to Florida Statute 1012.33 6A2, which would result in a recommendation subject to majority vote and final determination by district school board. Failure to notify the district within 15 days will constitute a waiver of the right to contest the charges of termination, and such charges will be considered final when approved by the board. Any grievant who elects to contest charges of termination will be suspended without pay during the pendency of the challenge. However, if the charges are not sustained, the employee shall be immediately reinstated and his or her back pay shall be paid if so required by Florida statute or by a final determination of an arbitrator. So that is what we meant when we thought we were adding, starting at step 4 for termination.
Okay, so the first, section of that, I'm obviously going to have to confer with our legal team to get their input on that. Now, the second part, if I'm understanding correctly, is a major change to, 50 years of history in this district, which is that, essentially you're innocent till proven guilty. I think you're suggesting proven guilty until proven innocent. So you're saying that if you're challenging a termination, I'm a little confused here. So let me give me have a second to read this.
Okay.
So you're not talking about you're just talking about termination. Now that I read it again, you're not talking about somebody's been put out on
That's correct.
Admin leave. Okay, that makes a little more sense. Any grievant who elects to contest charges. And that so that is our current practice. Dr. Green, where'd you go?
So our current practice is that we give the 15 days and then it goes to the board and then.
Okay, wait, let me ask you. So you're suggesting this happens before board approval?
The request comes before board approval. Yes, and before we were waiting until board action to determine the hearing status.
But okay, so I mean, there's several problems with this on our end from what I can see. And like I said, I haven't really sat down and looked at it closely.
Okay. Well, and
but
I knew this was...
I just wanted to give you some more information about our liability policy. So I mean, with our members, they, when they need an attorney, they're not eligible for the attorney until an action is taken. So in this case, they wouldn't be eligible for representation until the board terminates. So that could be problematic on our end, but you're also saying that they would stop being paid before board action occurred. And I don't think that's, from my understanding, an allowable practice.
So,
I mean, it takes board action to stop paying an employee, and you're trying to waive their right to the board taking action on their case.
So
So,
hang on one sec. Go back to your first issue.
Yeah.
Not eligible until an action is taken.
mhm.
So if I remember over the last couple of years in any case that I've been involved with, if I remember correctly, the superintendent would write a letter and the first option is a meeting with the superintendent. And I believe your attorneys have been involved in those very first meetings.
Here and there, yeah, you might be right about that. I mean, I have to be honest, I think they have been involved in a couple of those. So like I said, I'd have to review this, but let me ask you, what is it that you're trying to solve or accomplish here? I mean, let's just, I guess, kind of cut to the chase.
So a
What is
couple
the
of things. When we first added the word termination to the, Article 6, when we first added the word termination to the discipline section, we had a discussion at the table that you could either go this route, meaning a hearing, or you could go this route, meaning an arbitration. And I think over the course of the couple years that we've had this situation, we've kind of been in a conundrum of which way that it was going to go, because there's not been any specificity to how that occurs, how that request happens. And this is outlining how you make the request. And if you go the route of the arbitration, you start with step 4. And we had that big concern most recently, I believe last year, if we're gonna arbitrate a termination, where do we even start? And, we had talked at one point about going all the way back to step 1, which, so this is just a little clarity as to which direction and you would take and at what point and how it actually gets done.
Okay, so you're looking to create a process.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not going to be prepared to respond to this one today. I'm going to take it
That's why
back
we have November 11th scheduled. I mean, October 11th.
I was going to say better not.
October 11th.
Okay. All right. So, okay. Well, while you have that up, do you want to go through your responses to our proposals?
I sure can do that. So let me find them. Gotta find my. How about that?
Yep, that's good. If you want to make it a little bigger.
Nope, that didn't work. Hang on.
Dr. Green, the easiest way to make it bigger. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just had to get down to the one page. Okay, there we go. Can you see?
It's better.
Yeah, I can see it.
I can go a little bit bigger, but if I go too much bigger, I'm going to miss it off my screen.
Yeah, that's a little too big.
It is too big. Sorry.
So,
okay.
So let me ask you: Are you my piece in red? Are you striking that or
no? I'm leaving it. Well,
okay.
Can I talk?
All right.
Stop reading, Mr. Colucci.
I'm sorry. I'm like one of the students. You passed out the paper too soon.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to unshare my screen and go through them verbally. Is that what you want?
No, please, no.
Okay. All right. So we would agree to put the language about being compensated to cover classes in the contract. However, we do not want it to conflict with other articles in the other articles in the contract, which do allow principals to assign comp time or provide comp time as well. So those two articles are Article 6, Section 5 and Article 6, Section N. And basically, this is what they say. Principals will continue to assign a teacher to class or classes of an absent teacher and to provide comp time if a teacher loses his or her prep time as a result of the assignment. That's the first section. And the section, and the responsibility for supervising students shall be rotated as equitably as possible among teachers if it is not reasonably possible to obtain a substitute teacher or some other voluntary solution cannot be found. Those are the two ways currently that principals do assign teachers if they can't find someone that wants to be paid for it. And a teacher may receive either payment or comp time, but not both for giving up a planning period. And what we've done, because what we've said from our office over the last year, it's been so difficult to find a lot of coverage, is that we want to make it most easy on the principal and the teacher. What would you prefer? Do you want to be paid for it? Do you want the comp time? And teachers have different views. Sometimes they want the pay, sometimes they want the comp time. So our only intent here is not to bypass the option that principals still have to assign the teachers if we are going to give them, put in the contract that they get paid.
That is perfect. That is what we want as well.
Okay.
But we will review it before we agree to TA to make sure I'm not missing anything. But that is our intention to either do you want the money or do you want the comp time? So
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right.
The next one is the 40-hour work week in going to an hour of flex time. We do not have an issue with the hour. Going from 30 minutes to an hour does not create an issue for us. What would create an issue for us is having it be done without notice. Our principals still need 24 hours notice. Oftentimes, especially in this day and age when we're having struggles covering classes, it's, they have people assigned because they know where they're going to be, missing people. So we would want the 24 hours. We want the early release days put back in. And the last sentence would be such flex time is not intended to coincide with meetings, supervisory duties, scheduled professional development, or early release days. And again, there are other options to be off on those early release days, which would be comp time. We would not want it to be flex time for this section.
So that's my only question is why are we opposed to flexing time on early release days? I mean, because I think it might behoove the district to agree to that because that may very well be, non-student time. So, a sub wouldn't be needed or something like that. It's all non-student time. I get that, but I mean, it will give people a little more opportunity perhaps to get to doctor's office or something like that.
But not only that, keep in mind a couple of the proposals that we passed across where professional development is really important to us right now. And it's important, to the district as a whole, to the state as a whole, which I think we're going to be talking a little bit tomorrow about. But it's just, you have an avenue to be gone on early release time. And we would not want to include flex time on that.
Okay. All right. I understand.
Okay. Next section is the additional, it's the 9 hour days.
Mm-hmm.
We are rejecting this proposal, not for the reason that you may think. What we're rejecting it for is, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned it last time, I'm not 100% sure. This mandate by the state, this directive by the state about the extra hour is really going away, and we're paying this year and next year out of ESSER. After that, the only time that there would be any additional time that would come to a school would be if they were in turnaround status. That process comes with a lot of provisions by the state and sanctions if they're not met. And so we would be happy to look at the way that we've done the last few years, which is create an MOA for those schools that are in the 9 hour section or 9 hour work week. I will also say, related to your concern about people leaving, once they know about the 9 hour days, I can only speak to this past year, maybe a little bit the year before, but that has not been a provision that has been widely used. Just this past year, the only requests that we got to leave the 9 hour schools were one from Creel, but that was a different situation, not about the 9 hours, more about the person's situation that she was under at the time. A few from Oak Park. We had no requests from Endeavor, no requests from MIMS, and one from University Park. So we do our best to work with those teachers and find them assignments. We have not fought a teacher that wants to leave. So if that is your major concern, we feel that we've been pretty successful in finding them places. But this is no longer state required, except if we get in turnaround status. So
Okay.
we would be
So
adding something that,
you're saying you would be willing to discuss an MOA?
yes.
Okay. And I just, as far as the teachers, I think maybe you don't see it at Endeavor because they've had that for years in place. And I think MIMS has had it for a few years. But initially, when these schools changed to 9-hour day, I mean, that is a big change. If you have little kids that, you got to get to daycare, or school age kids, you got to get on the bus and get to the right places. So, yeah, and I'm not saying that the district has not worked with us, but side note, Brevard County, Brevard Federation of Teachers is 50+1 years old this year. And, we need to think about when Dr. Green is gone, Dr. Thetti and Mr. Colucci, how this thing is going to function. So that, I think, at least that piece may be something important to memorialize in the contract for future years.
Well, I'll let you come back with something.
Well, thank you for letting me come
Okay.
back with something. Okay.
All right. So the next one is about the CTE people and those that have shops. We are rejecting this proposal as well. It would be very difficult for us to explain to almost every other teaching group that we have within Brevard why we would let one group have an extra day of planning. Kindergarten teachers, English language arts teachers, who I've just heard two of our team members, one of yours and one of mine, talk about, 150 papers that they're grading at night and all throughout the year. And providing an extra planning day for CTE shop people is not equitable, we believe. They have things to do that everyone else has time to do, or, expectations, and everybody has those times built in. So we're not interested in that one. We're rejecting that one.
Kyle, did you have any thoughts onto that? Why specifically this group might need that?
Yeah, I'm just confused. I mean, this is a state tactic and a district tactic to try to, divide teachers and different classes and stuff. And I'm quite confused on this one. As far as these other teachers go, I think this was very limited to those that have types of machinery that they're responsible for maintaining, and the upkeep and the safety logs and all that on the machinery. And as far as I know, I mean, I was a classroom teacher, and yes, I did a lot of work, but I didn't have machinery on top of everything else I was supposed to keep, responsible of. And I actually see this as a liability issue more than anything when we have students underneath the machinery, because I mean, that was kind of where we were going for. It wasn't kind of saying like one group of teachers is working harder than another one, because that's not what BFT stands for at all. But it was a recognition that there is certain members that are teachers that have additional equipment that they must maintain. And I know a lot of these teachers were doing this over the summer uncompensated at one time to maintain the OSHA standards. And there's probably a better explanation of that. And I'm just confused with that part, Dr. Green.
Well, just that it's part of their curriculum, just like all teachers have things within their curriculum that they have to get done. And there's time built within, in every day, in, Fridays, in there's just additional planning time in there for everyone. And they're not, we don't see them as any different than any of the other teachers that have those responsibilities and expectations in their subject areas.
Okay, just one last question, Dr. Green. Do you know, it's not even worth it. I can see where you're going with this. Thank you.
All right, well, let's move on.
assignments and transfers. So, and I promise you, Anthony, I'm getting to stuff that we're gonna say yes to, but this is another one right in a row that we are rejecting. I think that the state has put into place by the reduction of the professional services contract that's out there for teachers, their ability for the annual contract process. And we have in place in our contract a process that's been working quite well. And by instituting something like this, we are adding back something that the state said that there isn't any more of, and that's seniority. We're providing seniority for a group of teachers when they are truly annual contract teachers. So our principals have the responsibility and the expectation to staff their buildings each year. And, you know, we're not interested in restricting their ability to do that with the annual contract group.
Dr. Green, do you have a statute you could point me to directly that says that this is not allowed?
I do not have statute that says that, but I mean, I don't have it offhand, but I will seek statute and get back with you with that statute.
It's, you know, it's my understanding, and for what I've seen, that is only in the cases of pay. Maybe I'm overlooking something, but not something like this.
Okay, I'll see what I can find.
Okay.
All right. Comp time utilization, we would agree to the carrying over 40 hours of comp time to the next school year. We would counter with the usage of comp time that the 24 hours be utilized during the normal student day, and a teacher may use an additional 16 hours during non-student time, and then take your last sentence back to the 24 hours. So again, we, you know, recognize that teachers are doing a lot of things to earn comp time, but that student day is pretty important to us. So the 24 hours during the normal student day, we would stick with and provide the additional 16 hours during non-student time.
And so that would also be for non-student days as well. So October 11th, if they wanted to use the whole 8 hours on comp time.
Yes, but October, yeah, that is true. That's true. October 11th is one of those, they can work at their own site where they choose to work on October 11th, as long as the work is done. The 2 days that are not eligible for comp time are the PD days, the one in August and the one in February. Those are not eligible for comp time.
And that's in there already. Refresh
Yes.
my memory.
Yes.
We talked about that last year.
Yeah.
And so then, let me look at my contract here. We still have like minimum 4 hour increment though, somewhere in the comp time usage language.
Can one of the principals help me with that?
Somebody got to give me a second. I'll find it. So what I'm getting at is I believe we still have in there that it has to be at least half day. Maybe it would be helpful maybe if we change that. So if you want to, you know, leave at, you know, an hour early at the end of the day with non-student time, you would be guaranteed to be able to use that.
Bert, Mira, Maggie, I can't, Jason, I can't see you because I'm sharing my screen. Is
Yeah,
there?
I don't know if I'm going outside of what is currently contract negotiated, but I will approve an hour of comp time for a teacher to go take their kid to a dentist appointment. So I'm already doing that, approving that. And like I said, I think I was within what the expectation was there. And teacher either finds their own coverage or we have someone step up and do it.
Yeah, me too.
Yep,
Okay.
same for me as well.
And Anthony, I finally found it in the contract. I'm looking. I don't see a half a day.
Okay.
Vanessa, are you familiar with the half a day?
I think that's something that we've talked about, but I don't think we ever memorialized it in any kind of contract language.
Actually, if you guys could hold on 1 second.
And I would say when I was in the building as well, Mr. Palucci, my teachers would take 1, 2, 3 hours. We didn't stick to half a day either.
Well, I know one thing. I should be wearing my glasses right now. So, all right. Okay. I'm just gonna double check that. That might be something else I'm thinking of, but I swear I just saw that the other day. All right, we'll double check that when we caucus, but I'm good.
Okay. Okay, so this one is related to video and recording devices. We do not have an issue with the first section that you proposed. Every effort shall be made to not place a video and a recording device with direct view of a teacher desk, exceptions may be made for safety if there is no other possible location for the device to fully cover an area. We don't have any issue with that sentence. I would ask, so we're all clear, what your definition of direct view is. Because that's, I'm interpreting that. I want to make sure my assumption is clear that direct view is the camera is pointing down at the teacher's desk. But if it means something different, I need to understand what direct view means. We would reject the other 3 sections of that article.
Dr. Green, I'm gonna ask you about the direct view and maybe try to get a clarification. Would you agree that if the camera was placed 1 foot behind a teacher's desk, even though it gets the whole area, that would be direct view?
I would not agree with that. That's my point to the question of what that
Okay, so
means.
then I don't understand what you guys are actually agreeing to. If a camera above a teacher's desk, that is like 6 inches above a teacher's desk. And I'm trying to be very careful of what I discuss here because it was actually the district that had a lot of concerns about how we discussed this. So I'm trying to be very careful on that. But if a teacher had a camera within 6 inches behind their desk, and if that's not, with direct view of a teacher desk, I don't know what would be.
So ask yourself this question. Where does a teacher place her desk? A teacher places his or her desk with the most optimal view of everything that's going on in the classroom.
Dr. Green, can I ask you how many teacher desks there are in a classroom?
1.
I was once again, I'm trying to be very careful how I discuss this. I was in a room with a teacher desk that had 5 cameras. So I think with 5 cameras, I don't think that's a great argument because with 5 cameras, I think there's an ability that we don't put a camera 6 inches behind a teacher's head. And I would consider that direct view of a teacher desk. So I'm not quite sure what the district's actually agreeing to.
So again, direct view for me is it's staring down at your desk and there's nothing else that's being viewed except the teacher's desk, direct view of the teacher's desk. So if we need to change that language, like we're willing to say, we're willing to add something. And I know this has been an important piece of information for BFT for years, ever since I've been in this role. It's been important for you to have some protections in the contract. And we're saying, we don't have an issue with the outline of what you've stated. But we would not agree with the other 3. But direct view in our mind is that a direct view is it's down right on the teacher's desk, not that it's viewing what's happening out among the classroom.
So Kyle, if you're going to just ask you to hold on, we'll try to write some clarification and
Anthony,
resubmit.
can I ask one follow-up question though? I'll be quick.
Yes.
Can you talk about the other one about using recordings for teacher evaluations?
Well, actually, Kyle, I was going to ask about these things because Dr. Green, you took the words out of my mouth. You said that these things have been important to BFT for years now. And this proposal that we passed across the table, except for the part about the student view, we believe that the district is already doing these things. The district already agrees to these things. And we just wanted to put that in our contract so our members, the teachers, can rest assured that these cameras are their main objective of having these cameras is student safety and staff safety. And so all we're asking is that the things that the district are already doing are just written out in the contract. Because honestly, you rejecting these makes me feel like you guys aren't being truthful with us. Because we have talked to several different departments about the cameras in the classroom, from facilities to HR to administrators, and we feel like this is right in line with what they are being used for, or are not being used for. So I don't understand why you guys can't agree to have them have these 3 lines in here.
Because they're absolutes. And I'm not going to say that ever something would not be caught on a camera that wouldn't be used for some other reason, ever. What I'm saying, what we're saying is we don't sit around as administrators. Nobody has time to sit around as the principal of a building and watch live feeds. But that doesn't mean that if I'm working in my building and I happen to have a monitor in my building and I stand up to take a stretch break and I see something occur on the video, that I'm not going to go investigate it, right? I'm not going to say that if something happens where a camera has a view of something, that it would never end up written in discipline or evaluation.
Dr. Green, if I could stop you right there, that's not what this language says. So first of all, it says any recordings captured from video and or audio recordings cannot be used in a teacher evaluation. All right. So I know, I'd like to believe none of the principals on your team are using, and it's my understanding, if I'm not saying too much, none of these things even have audio, so none of them, they're not being used on the IPIS right now. So that's not happening.
Anthony.
And that would be like the world's worst way to evaluate a teacher.
And in a normal, that is absolutely true. I will agree with that, but I'm not going to say that it would never happen. If something was caught on a camera and something was being investigated and there happened to be video evidence of it, that it wouldn't be used.
Okay, so hold on, please. So what you're saying is you might be open to this if we changed it from an absolute to perhaps say something like, other than in instances where a teacher, a recording was part of the investigative file, which resulted in discipline.
Yeah, we would look at that. Yes, you could,
okay.
You could rewrite something and put it up there.
Okay.
Anthony, can I just ask a general question or make a point? I feel like if this goes the way that it sounds like it might, you'll have an unintended consequence of a lot of teachers leaving the profession. Like, I feel like one of the core issues that I hear when I talk to teachers is we already feel like we're not respected for our degrees. We're not respected as professionals. And then this seems to just kind of layer right on top of that and undercut, the trust level that there should be. And I understand that there's a few bad apples that can spoil a bunch, but I would just be wary that this might be one of those straws that we don't think is going to break the camel's back, but it does.
So, and then Dr. Green, so 2A, administrators may view or / use recorded materials as part of the investigative process when requested from BPS security. That is what we were told has to happen. We were told that, you know, the administrators do not have the ability to, you know, take a clip out of those recordings without district security. So I don't want to say it, but I don't feel like somebody's being honest with us. You know, I mean, unless I and Kyle, who sat in these meetings, have misunderstood what was told to us, I don't, you know, I don't understand perhaps why there wasn't, you know, a counter given on those pieces, because, you know, like you said, that we've been asking this. I think this is year 3 and I mean, we've really pared this down to some basic level of protection. So, Kyle, am I misunderstanding? Is this
Yeah,
not what I'm told?
I'm very confused, you know, of what I don't understand, because what we were told is already being done is the practice of the district was laid out here, very generalized statement to give the district some leadway because there's security protocols in place. And we were already told that principals don't sit around their desk and watch this live. Principals don't use this for evaluations. And if a principal wanted to request video, there was a process that the principal followed, because they don't have access to recordings. They have access to all the cameras. But I'm, you know, once again, trying to be respectful for what we were asked. So I don't understand, Dr. Green, if it's happening or not, because we try to put in writing what we were told the district's already doing, and then none of that was accepted.
Well, the first section was, and I will say this, if you wish me to go back to the same groups of people and have conversations, I'm happy to do so, and let you know if I come up with anything different.
All right, well, okay, let's move on. Is that the last one?
No. Okay.
Oh, yeah, then the substance abuse, okay.
There's two more, I think two. So the drug-free workplace. We know where this came from, and it is a place that is not public education. I believe what you mirrored your policy after. We have a counter to what you've written, and it actually explains the purpose of our drug-free workplace. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the counter, and I'll put it up on the screen in a minute. But I think you have to understand that there are so many policies, federal and state statutes, that come into play with our drug-free workplace. It's not as simple as taking another entity's policy and, you know, writing it for us. So we have, you know, responsibilities under our administrative code with the Division of Workers' Compensation that are required to be followed. We are required to document injury. We are required to ask people if they've been injured. We are required to ask people if they want medical treatment. You know, our people are required to report, and we hear some of the concerns that you've issued here, and I have some thoughts about it. But before I tell you some of those thoughts, I just want to read the language that we've proposed. So our language starts from scratch. So I'm going to scroll through what you had proposed, and this would be our counter. Brevard Public Schools maintains a drug-free workplace through its implementation of Board Policy 3124 and AP 3124 Drug-Free Workplace Technical Guide. This policy is guided by Florida Statute 440 on workers' compensation, 20 U.S. Code on Omnibus Transportation Testing Act, 20 U.S. Code 701 through 706 Rehabilitative Act of 1973, and 41 U.S. Code 701 Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988, among other federal and state requirements for public school districts. Violations of Board Policy 3124 may result in termination according to the policy. If termination occurs, Brevard Federation of Teachers may utilize the terms in Article 4 of this agreement to grieve the termination. Disciplinary action may be instituted against employees who have violated standards of conduct cited in this guide, and who the board believes will not be assisted by rehabilitation, or who the board believes will have or have had a negative impact on students and or staff pursuant to board policy, applicable Florida statutes, or State Board of Education rules. Disciplinary sanctions, if appropriate, will be implemented as articulated in board policy, applicable Florida statute, State Board of Education rules, and 34 CFR 86201B. The board may not discharge, discipline, discriminate against, or request or require rehabilitation of an employee on the sole basis of a positive drug test, excluding breathalyzer testing that's not verified by a confirmation test. Nothing will preclude the board from seeking prosecution of the drug-free workplace policy where the board deems appropriate. Board employees who self-report substance abuse problems prior to any incident requiring the employee's drug testing will be afforded employee assistance with the district employee assistance program. Depending upon the substance involved, this may necessitate the employee requesting a leave from his or her position while he or she is in treatment. The leave will be charged to the employee's accrued time. That's our counter. This past summer, we just went through the rewrite of the drug-free workplace policy. And, you know, there were two hearings and then the opportunity to speak when it was up for board approval. No one spoke on any side of what the board was revising our policy to be. Our policy had taken into consideration all of the concerns that we had heard over the last year with the policy. And we attempted to, you know, meet those concerns and still remain compliant with all of the entities that we're required to be compliant with for all of those areas of rules, statutes, and legislation. So we're happy to answer any questions. I believe Antonia is on the line, and I believe Rosemary is on the line, and they're the ones that work exclusively with our workers' comp and our risk and our insurance and those statutes which relate to drug-free workplace.
Well, so Dr. Green, why is it that you are afraid to define reasonable suspicion in the contract?
So there are some things that I'm not sure that you may understand related to reasonable suspicion. So for example, reasonable suspicion is, well, first of all of these things are available on our website, and I'm not sure that everybody knew that, but related to reasonable suspicion.
Hold on, I gotta stop you right there. Therein lies the problem.
I meant the
Therein
bargaining.
lies the problem. That everybody here doesn't know this is on the website. That's why it needs to go in the contract. Okay, continue, I'm sorry.
So reasonable suspicion, there's a process by which reasonable suspicion is identified. It's trained every year, and it's not just, you know, we don't just pick people in and say, hey, we think you've been doing this or we think you've been doing that. Reasonable suspicion has to be an observable behavior by two different administrative personnel independently of each other in order to even start the process for reasonable suspicion. I'm not sure that I'm not sure that you were aware of that. You know, there are requirements related to the procedure itself. I don't know if you have any specific questions or.
Well, I mean, so in the drug-free work policy, it somewhat spells out reasonable suspicion. Why would we be hesitant to put that in the contract?
Well, this starts out that we maintain a drug-free workplace through its implementation of Board Policy 3124 and Administrative Procedures 3124. So by referencing that, it, you know, just like the drug-free workplace technical guide is inherently included in the drug-free policy, if we're referencing this, that's where they can find that information. There was another thing I wanted to
So,
mention.
so let me ask you this. So, you're not saying you object to mirroring that definition that's in the policy guide in the contract?
I'm saying we label it right there, policy 3124 and administrative procedures 3124. It's right there. Why would we?
Well, because
know,
frankly,
rewrite
I'm trying to, I'm just gonna be honest, trying to establish the right to grieve it. And I want it to be specific, so we can grieve if it is not reasonable suspicion. So I
So
mean,
what's wrong with the last sentence? If termination occurs, Brevard Federation of Teachers may utilize the terms in Article 4 of this agreement to grieve the termination. I have yet found, to respond to that, I've yet found any grievance that we've not accepted because we didn't feel it was part of the contract. And again, I hear what you say.
well,
it's-
that it has happened in the past before you were in the position.
So
Let me just explain, surrounding our evaluation system, which is loosely tied to the contract, but was not explicit enough. I mean, we've done some more to make some more explicit connections to the IPAs, but that's kind of what I'm concerned about, is if it's not explicit enough, then we may not be able to grieve it. And
So you
like I
might-
said, it might not, got to remember, might not be you and I
Right.
discussing this in 10 years from now,
But
so.
I changed the title, Anthony, I changed Article 10, Section D, drug-free workplace. So if it's all encompassing, I would respectfully say that if you wanted to grieve something under the drug-free workplace policy, that's the new name of I changed your title from substance abuse testing to drug-free workplace.
All right, well, let me mull that over some more, but I still think it behooves everyone to have a definition of reasonable suspicion in there. So, so when people look at the contract, it's there. So when people have questions, it's there and not buried in policies on the district website. I did have another question. Let me see, what was my other question? So I still go back to this though, and this has to do with workers' comp. We're still at a loss for understanding, and this, happens on a weekly basis, that our teachers who are being bitten, who are being punched, kicked, a desk thrown at them, etc., as well as staff, as well as administrators. Why are they being drug tested? Because a kid, a student with a disability that involves behavior, is attacking them. Let me put it this way. I get why in some circumstances that might be appropriate, but if we know that this is a student with a disability surrounding their behavior, is doing the hitting, biting, kicking, punching, desk throwing, etc., why are these folks having to be drug tested? You want to talk about a morale issue, you just got the heck beat out of you by an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, or a 17-year-old, or a 20-year-old in some cases, and you're being sent in for a drug test. So I guess in those specific circumstances, let's say student with a disability related to their behavior, why are our teachers, staff, and administrators having to take drug tests?
So I'm going to let Antonia and or Rosemary pipe in here, but the issue that is about the injury, not about the cause of the injury, related to our workers' comp responsibilities. It's not about what caused it. It's about the fact that there is an injury. Rosemary or Antonia, is there any, and again, I can't see you because I'm sharing my screen. Is there anything that you would like to add there?
Yes, hi, this is Antonia. You're absolutely correct. It's not about what caused the injury, but the fact that there is an injury, and we can't, under workers' comp rules, discriminate under one person based on the type of injury and how it happened. So it's an across the board ruling under the workers' comp rules and regulations that if we're participating in a drug-free workplace statute and requirements, we have to treat everyone the same. Rosemary, is anything else you'd like to add?
The only thing I would say is that, you know, when a teacher reports that they have been injured, you know, we can't go on the basis that this is an ESE student or a person with or a student with a disability. The teacher is reporting that they have suffered an injury. I know a lot of times as teachers or instructional assistants, they will be injured sometimes daily by the same student, and a lot of times they fill out the risk management accident incident report to help document their case when it comes to a student that has a disability that is disrupting the classroom. In those types of cases, if an instructional assistant or a teacher calls us and says, look, we have been reporting, you know, day after day after day, if it's within a 2-week period, we don't make that teacher or that instructional assistant go for another drug screen. If it's the same type of injury student, we don't make them go every single time they report something like that if they're just trying to document for documentation purposes that it's an ESE student and the student is having issues. We make them go when it is a new injury or some time has subsided, because again, we have to treat everyone the same. And if they are coming to the secretary or whoever their supervisor is and they're reporting something, they are reporting an injury. We just had one last week where a teacher was stung by an insect and they wanted medical treatment. So they were sent for a drug test because they reported that it was an injury.
Can I also say related to that, because I know that was a conversation piece that we had last time about the bee sting. In discussions with Antonia and Rosemary, if a teacher states, I was not injured, and they're just making the incident report for documentation, if they state, I was not injured, there is a place to sign related to that, and then it stops right there. Because oftentimes, I think you all said it, or someone said it in the last couple of weeks as I've been researching this, a person really might not know that they're injured right off the bat. Or the case of the bee sting, if they say I wasn't injured, then there's a place to sign and then it ends. So my response when I heard that was, well, then what happens if, you know, a week down the road, they decide they were injured? And the response I got from, I believe, Ms. Scipio and Ms. Browning is that they can change their answer, but then they start the process then.
In the case of the bee sting, the teacher literally called and said they weren't injured. I mean, they got ice that's for their finger, but that's anytime you get stung by an insect, you're going to try to get the swelling to go down. But she didn't want to seek medical treatment. She didn't want to do anything. It was more of a notification process. So there's also, if that's the case, and there's some training that needs to take place on the school level, because that teacher was very much sent for a drug test, even though she said, I am not injured, I don't need to go seek medical treatment. They still sent her for a drug test, even after I called and asked about it too.
So let me ask you this. It's my understanding that the district is making the decision to use workers' comp for the drug-free workplace instead of, in lieu of random drug testing. Am I understanding that right? That came up in negotiations a few years back. Do we have a choice of whether we use random drug testing or testing for workers' comp? Can somebody answer that question?
Rosemary, we talked a little bit about that when we were meeting.
So years ago, it was my understanding that to meet the drug-free workplace requirements in order to receive a reduced rate on our premiums that we pay for to the Division of Workers' Compensation, we either have to have a drug-free workplace that requires post-accident drug screening, reasonable suspicion, as well as pre-employment drug screens.
So Rosemary, was that an or an and in there?
No, those are so the requirements to have a drug-free workplace and receive a discount on our premiums that we pay to the Division of Workers' Compensation is that you have to have a pre-employment, post-accident drug screen, reasonable suspicion. Now, I believe that you can replace a post-accident with a random. I'd have to look at the rules requiring the division that requires us to have this. However, I know that in past negotiations, and this stems all the way back from like 2006-07, that teachers did not want random polls. So that's where the post-accident drug screen was left into the contract.
Thank you for your clarification on that. And I'm not necessarily saying we want that, but I just want to make sure I understand the options, as do the folks watching. Kyle, did you have anything else for Dr. Green about this?
I had two questions, and the first one was, maybe I'm a little confused, but I've done quite a bit of research on this. The first one is, I did not realize the district paid workman's comp insurance. I thought we were self-insured for workman's comp because I know the board contributes money on a yearly basis for workman's comp. So I don't know if you could help clarify that.
We have premiums that we have to pay to the Florida Department of Finance for the Division of Workers' Compensation that relates to a special disability trust fund. And there's one other fund that escapes my mind right now, but those are required by every employer within the state of Florida.
Okay, and could you maybe either point us to it or share the guidelines? Because it was under my understanding and from previous conversations with risk management and BPS's department that the choice for how the post-accident drug screen was done, the employer actually has a little bit more say on how you meet that requirements, because I think there's huge confusion about what you're saying and about what's actually occurring at the level with our teachers. Because I know of an incident last year, and I know we're not trying to run down every incident we know of, but I know of an incident last year where another member of the staff saw them fall. The teacher got up, said he or she was okay, told their principal they were okay, did not want to fill out an incident report, and they were made to fill out an incident report. They put on there they were not injured, and they were still made to go get a drug test. So I'm kind of confused, like what you're describing and what we've heard happen and actual reality is a little bit different. And I think this was some of the reason that we were trying to get it into the contract so it was clear.
I can certainly provide those guidelines to Dr. Green to put forth. That comes from the Division of Workers' Compensation. What you have to understand also as well is that what teachers and support staff sometimes tell union reps is not what we hear every day. I mean, if you want to review every single case, 9 times out of 10, that person is telling us on the phone at that time, yes, I am injured. Yes, I want treatment. And that was what prompts the drug test, is because they are reporting that they're injured. Later on, they might tell somebody else, no, they weren't injured. If somebody witnesses somebody having an accident, of course, we want them to fill out the risk management incident report, because it's also a protection for that person. If they would have decided 5-7 days later that, yes, they were really injured, because they filled out that incident report, it is a protection for that person that was injured. Even though they said they might not have been injured at that time, 7 days down the road, they might determine that they are injured and want medical treatment at that time. And because we had reported it at that time with an incident report, we are not fined by the state of Florida for neglecting to report an injury. And then that person can have the injury called in and then go for treatment.
I appreciate that. And then one last question, Anthony, I had for Dr. Green was, I understand what you were trying to do with put the policy into the contract, but I think we kind of both agree that this is, a subject of bargaining. And if we just point to a policy in the contract, can the board change that policy without having to negotiate that with the collective bargaining agent?
I don't know, but I'll find out an answer to that.
Thank you.
Let me
All right.
write that down before I go on. Okay. Okay. You want me to keep going, Anthony?
Yeah. Yeah.
The next one was the parental leave. We're countering only because we're agreeing to the strike of D. So you struck D, we're good with that. But we're going back with 5 days. We would like to see a history, not just 1 year of costs, because this is a financial implication. So we'd like to see, a little bit more history before we up the 5 days, but we're good with taking D out.
Well, we appreciate that, but Dr. Green, we're a little frustrated because we did some public records requesting about the amount of money the parental leave actually cost last year. And we were told that it was going to cost about $300,000 to implement. In reality, it cost, I believe, $80,000 is what we found. So we'll take that you rejected the 10 days because we're going to bring that back with 15 days as our new offer. Because if you have $300,000 budgeted for it and you're only spending 80 on it, well, then let's spend what you're budgeting. And like I said, we're a little frustrated because we got that public record conveniently after we made this proposal. So the history of parental leave we have right now is it costs a whole lot less than you're figuring, and we would still even disagree that that is a true cost, because a lot of the true cost is the cost of the substitute. And we know that, first of all, not every position that goes on leave requires a substitute. And secondly, we know that a substitute is not even being hired to fill one of these. So just to let you know that we will be countering this and asking for 15 days, which you guys which fits right in the budget. You guys told us that you are paying for this, and we'll be happy to share the public record if you don't have a copy of it.
The last thing is sick leave usage. I think this is the last thing for the Marathon Health Center. So we're countering with the time allotted for this shall not exceed 1 hour per year per employee. Absences under this section must be approved 24 hours in advance. Administration, and then we have a caveat. Administration will work with Marathon Health Clinics to reserve slots for teacher appointments between the hours of 3 p.m. and close each day.
I'm a little confused. So you're saying they would only be able to use this after 3 o'clock?
No, so we'll give for a scheduled appointment 1 hour per employee per year.
But how are they going to get to a well care center, have their appointment, and get back within an hour? I mean, it has been a major discussion in SIAC for a long time that these well care centers, anybody on beachside has got an issue getting to one. So how are they going to do this in an hour? How is the employee at Gemini Elementary School going to make it to a well care center and back within an hour?
So I think they're doing tremendous amount of virtual appointments. But again, scheduling the time toward the end of the day, letting them get out early, reserving slots at the end of the day, they could be gone an hour before the end of the day.
And would that still only be allowed one time?
Would,
Like the one time, is that?
it 1 hour per year per employee during work time.
I don't think that's gonna help the situation very much. We're trying to encourage people to use these things, and I don't think that is really going to be much of an incentive to get folks to use these. And frankly, it's confusing what you're saying here, and if folks can't even understand quite what it means, it's really not going to make an impact. But like I said, I want to know how that employee from Gemini Elementary School is going to get to ESF. Would probably be the closest. I don't know, maybe Central Middle School, and then in 20 minutes have a 30-minute. I mean, it's not feasible. And like I said, when we chose 4 hours, we were not trying to game the system. We sat here and we worked through scenarios trying to figure out how long it would be, and I mean, it might work for a virtual appointment, but I don't think a virtual appointment is appropriate for everything. Otherwise, we wouldn't have WellCare centers. We would just have a virtual telemedicine. So I don't know. I'm afraid that's not gonna do what we need it to do.
Okay, I think I'm at the end of.
And in the meantime, the WellCare centers will just sit there unused as we're paying, millions of dollars a year for them. So.
I'm
All
going
right.
to stop sharing.
Okay. All right, I will go through our responses to your proposals. Okay, are you looking at my screen?
I am.
Okay. Okay, so the first proposal about the just getting the materials online rather than distributed to us specifically, that's fine. We will accept that. Well, this proposal as was written, we would reject that. As it was written, it prevented us from grieving just cause for step 1, 2, and 3. So we had to reject that.
And you have my new ones.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. So for this calendar proposal and the amount of professional development days, this is what I'm willing to do is talk about an MOA to extend the contract year for 1 day for professional development. So if this is really something that the district feels is needed at this time, there is plenty of funding with our ARP grant to pay for that. So if you guys are serious about this, let's talk about, let's have an extra day in the calendar.
Say that again, Anthony, what grant?
The American Rescue Plan. It's one ESSER, one of those. It's the latest one. It's the biggie that's the district is taking input on how to spend. But as far as these specific things, these are just too valuable for our teachers. This is too much hard fought battle to get to where we are at in these places. There are endless concerns about the quality of professional development on early release days. So that is not something that we're going to agree to. I'm trying to be fair, and I'm listening to what you're saying about having more time for professional development. So I'm willing to put that idea out there of one extra paid day for professional development. Any questions on that?
No, thank you.
All right. We're gonna reject this proposal about itinerant teachers and non-school site service teachers are not, their planning isn't required to fall within the 6.5 hour workday. Not sure what's going on, why this group always seems to be targeted, but just because these teachers are itinerant doesn't mean that they shouldn't have the same rights as the rest of our teachers do. It's my understanding that some of them are already assigned duties, morning and afternoon duties at schools. But you know, this group has been, for lack of a better word, targeted previously, and they're teachers who just happen to be in several buildings, and they needed to be treated as such. So we're going to reject that proposal. The clarification about signing out, we will accept that. We have no issue with that. It's just putting a little more clarity to it, and we agree. Previously, we were going to reject this, but I'm asking you guys to, after the discussion with Dr. Fontan, to kind of reword it and give it back to us now that we have a better understanding. And we were rejecting it because, you know, essentially we didn't understand what was going on. Want to reject this one about faculty meetings. No teacher shall be disciplined for failure to complete assignments for PLC, PLT meeting. We need that phrase or any other meetings in there, because then all somebody has to do is say, well, it's a team meeting, so you need to read this book, and you know, Joe, you read chapters 1 through 3, have your PowerPoint ready for Monday. Sandy, you got chapters 4, 5, and 6, have your PowerPoint. That's what we're trying to avoid. So we want that phrase or other meetings. You know, we're not saying teachers shouldn't come prepared to their data meetings with data. I mean, we're not opposed to that, but you know, book studies, PLC, you know, we've seen it previously where there were homework assignments, and we don't want the same thing occurring with a different name. So we've rejected that, and we have no issue with the personal academic freedom changes. So we're going to accept that proposal. You with me still? Okay.
Yes, sir. I forgot I muted myself. Sorry about that.
And then after I reread this, we have no issue with that, because that is currently the practice that's going on in the district. So we will accept that. And finally, we do have a counter proposal for you on this. I do understand where you're coming from. We have been doing open book full book negotiations for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years now. So I see where you're coming from. So our counter proposal will be, we'll negotiate salary and benefits next year and agree that each party would bring no more than 2 proposals to negotiations for the 22-23 contract. With that said, we foresee with the ARP grant there will be the need for MOAs. So we're not talking about not negotiating that federal COVID money. And of course, there may be things that develop in the legislative session that require us to adjust some contract language, but we would limit it basically to 2 proposals per side. Okay. All right. So do you have any questions on what we had or clarification?
I don't. What are your thoughts about, I mean, like, you've given us homework.
Yeah. So is that in your contract that there's no homework? Because it's not a PLC in that case. It's not. No, so I think what you're saying is, do we want to just resume on October 11th? Is that what you're saying, or do you
Yeah,
want to caucus and come back?
Why don't we say October 11th? And knowing we have work to do between now and then.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. I think I'm good with that. So I'm trying to think, what's today? So 20, so 2 weeks. Okay. All right.
I appreciate your time. I really appreciate the discussion with Dr. Fontan and the input from all of you. I think it's important that we all, understand the intent of what we're trying to do. And I think what Dr. Fontan and Melissa tried to point out is it's to protect teachers in this litigious time that we're facing ourselves. And it seems to be no latitude by the state, regardless of all the things we're facing. So I do appreciate your input.
All right. So I think we've exhausted ourselves, and so October 11th we'll come back. I mean, I'm glad to see we've made considerable progress already, which is nice, and I'm glad both sides were able to accept some of the proposals, and we'll be able to move on to those ones that need some tweaking. And we will see you on the 11th. And I'm going to ask my team to hang on for a few minutes, and I'm going to stop recording.
And my team's hopping onto a different format.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
All right. Give me a second, my team, to stop. Hold on. Hold on. Oh, here it is. Okay. All right. Stop.